There's a term called COVID theatric, and you're probably familiar with the term, but have you ever seen this? Watch. So that to me looks like a film crew doing some heart-sobbing COVID misery filming. Here's another angle. Now, what is the purpose, you ask? Positive energy. It's a term that supposedly boosts morale and instills confidence in the party's ability to tame the pandemic. The Chinese Communist Party propaganda is full on blast over the situation of COVID in China, and in Shanghai in particular, it's a mixture of rampant fake reopenings and theatrics. Shanghai is reopened, says the authority, but it's not. The story is that after 2 months under lockdown, Shanghai is told that they're now once again open. Shops, public spaces, facilities are all good to go. You're expecting 25 million people in Shanghai to freely do whatever they want. Except, all the citizens need to have an app on their phone. A QR code that basically dictates your entire life. Watch this. All these people holding up their green barcode so that they can be admitted into having a life in Shanghai. It's like a total dystopian society. And not only that, guess what? The color of that QR code can change anytime. Say if you were accidentally sitting next to a person who has COVID or has a yellow or red code. And of course, if you have a red code, you're barred from leaving your home. In other words, from just one app restriction, Shanghai's millions of households cower in fear over the color of their square. And a video circulating online shows elderly people needing to use the bathroom. But the catch is that they need to scan their QR code to do so. And most of them don't know how to operate such apps. So imagine the next time you go to the bathroom, having PPE warriors guarding your only privacy outside of all the other intrusions, the bathroom. That's something novels can't even write about. And we're not done yet. Allegedly, the COVID test or stay-home model that Shanghai and many other cities continue to use will expire in 72 hours, which means every 72 hours you will have to stand in line and guess what? Pray that you don't get a yellow or a red square on your app. And that's not even the core issue. The idea is that some believe as long as the government can kill the virus, whatever sacrifices our individual liberties need to make, so be it, right? Well, I mean, isn't that what most people think? But that draconian measure doesn't actually do anything to COVID, nor will it ever. Just days after Shanghai's supposed reopening, one community already went back into lockdown. And that's before the entire city even reopened. And a few days ago, more cases were found again. And because you're dealing essentially with Omicron, which is a highly infectious variant that lockdowns and draconian measures cannot control, plus additional rules like residents running or requiring to show a green square to even leave their houses, while needing a negative PCR test to access banks and use transportation, and a 7 to 14 days quarantine, additional measures if you leave Shanghai, none of these make sense anymore given the type of virus that we're dealing with. Authorities in Shanghai do not actually mention they ever went into lockdown. They call it, quote, Shanghai has quieted down. In an announcement issued by the Shanghai government, not a single word actually mentions about the city closing or locking down. Instead, it's literally described as Shanghai, a mega city, has quieted down like never before. Of course, there's no mentioning of the word reopen either. Because without the city ever closing, as they claim, there will be no such thing as reopening. And Shanghai apparently has only experienced a poetic journey from quiet to moving again. And this certainly is not an oversight on the part of Shanghai officials, but rather an elaborate design. From an internal notice of the Shanghai government, which is suspected to be circulating on the internet, we can find that the Shanghai authorities asked the media not to use the terms like lockdown in their reports, saying that Shanghai is different from Wuhan, and in that no city closures has ever been announced, and therefore there's no such thing as reopening. And Shanghai's total stop on COVID management is just the pressing the stop button and nothing more. When the officials relegate the humanitarian crisis that was Shanghai for the last 2 months, downplaying it as a quiet vacation for Shanghai, well, they needed an enemy for the citizens to blame. So they shifted all the consequences of all the coercive measures during the shutdown, whether in terms of human lives or economic collapse, to the resident committee, saying that these community organizations are voluntary structures and they did all the dirty work. Well, what exactly is a resident committee? Well, these are community-level organizations that enforce the central government's rules in the neighborhood. And the committee consists of residents in that neighborhood. Essentially, the officials in Shanghai now blame the residents themselves for putting themselves into lockdowns. According to this logic, the Shanghai people with their high revolutionary consciousness voluntarily sealed themselves off for 2 months by means of self-government, and it was voluntary to keep their doors welded shut and to put wire mesh on the stairs. Or the iron fences used as hard barriers outside each building were also put up by the residents themselves. In fact, even the QR codes to leave their houses to go shopping, or sometimes even including to go outside to walk, all these permits were issued by themselves. The Shanghai government is claiming all these things were invented and used by the residents themselves voluntarily, and that the residents voluntarily starved. The number of people who died of starvation, illness, and who jumped and suicided from buildings because they could not get supplies and were waiting for the results of their nucleic acid test, had no access to medical treatments, and all of these were apparently just voluntarily offered to the party, I guess for the greater victory of the Zero COVID struggle campaign. What exactly is this then? Forced Stockholm syndrome? Well, the Communist Party not only beats you, imprisons you, starves you, and then they also kill you, but now they're asking you to admit publicly that you were well beaten, starved, and killed, all because you wanted to do so. And you wanted to do so because you wanted to actively satisfy the party's needs. And the party never forced you to do anything, apparently. Of course, this has caused dramatic reactions among Chinese citizens. Some people poke fun at it, saying that, sarcastically of course, that a foreign power, aka imperialist United States, had to go to Shanghai and shut the city down. So what exactly does this community organization known as the Residents Committee do? Well, this kind of organization was created in the 1950s and has changed several times since. In August 2010, the Office of the Central Government and the Office of the State Council issued a piece called Opinions on Strengthening and Improving the Construction of Urban Community Resident Committees, which included all the funds for the works of the committees, the compensation of their staff, and the construction of the service facilities and community information technology into its government budget. So based on that, the neighborhood committee is actually, they're autonomous in name, but actually receive the government's funding. In other words, although everyone knows that the neighborhood committee is the de facto long arm inside each community of the party, the Communist Party can always claim that it has been an autonomous organization all along, and the residents has nothing to do with the party. So performing actual governmental functions without recognizing any governmental name seems to be the case here. And this is the special role played by the neighborhood committees. In rural areas, these are called village committees, or residence committees if you live in a condo area. And this is exclusive to the Communist Party in that it has always been able to switch between two phases of the government as to their people's needs. This is what they did initially, and they can also do it both externally and internally based on whoever they interact with. Now, Shanghai dumping the blame on the committees isn't a new thing. During the Cultural Revolution, propaganda has it that Mao's Red Guards seized and fought against capitalists. In reality, they just raided homes, tortured and killed people in the streets. And they operated outside the law. They all acted on the basis of a notice from above or a decision, and that the situation required. So when the Cultural Revolution was over, the party changed its face to clean up the Red Guards under no judicial processes. Those that did the bloody work were either jailed, executed, or left to rot. And for more than 20 years, the Chinese Communist Party has been ostensibly building the rule of law based on a facade and the apparent peacetime. In 1999, the exact same type of extrajudicial organization was also created, the 610 system. And it was always relying on the internal instructions or phone calls, so there is no actual, not even a single official government document in sight. And tens of thousands of people have been quietly evaporated or sent into a deep, dark prison in the midst of the system. And the reason for this relationship is to illustrate that this system of control was restored and further expanded during the persecution of Falun Gong, and was then used directly in Xinjiang against the Uyghur population. With this system, the CCP secretly detains millions of people and builds numerous high-security concentration camps, almost silently, without the outside world knowing, because it was never written into law. And it was only when a few survivors would escape that type of situation that the tip of the iceberg of this genocidal crime was actually revealed. And not only that, you have the CCP openly claiming that everything is lawful, because, well, they never were written into the law to begin with. And now, as you can see, this system is being used in Shanghai, and the Shanghai authorities' public flip-flop should not be underestimated for its serious implications. Because this isn't an ordinary shameful excuse to just shift the blames away, but this is a sign that this system of control are controlled by words instead of the law. So basically, to summarize, the neighborhood committees, or the residence committee, are in fact acting as the Red Guards of the Cultural Revolution, the 610 office, the secret concentration camps systems of the 2022. And they can act arbitrarily according to a vague and flexible notice from above, or written words or verbal instructions. That includes depriving people of their freedom and even property if necessary, and once the conflict escalated, the situation expanded, they could just easily be sacrificed at any time by taking the blame for the unauthorized decision and start all over again with a new group of people. By creating distance, whether the economy is going bad or the humanitarian disaster is overwhelming, this responsibility is not blamed on zero COVID, but rather just a quote-unquote local issue, and these people acted voluntarily. According to the Shanghai's official statement, all these COVID measures were implemented by the Residence Committee and that the government never issued a document asking them to do so. And the authorities only needed the Residence Committee to bear the public opinion on this crime and pressure of zero COVID. And once you want to get serious and go through the process, you will find that actually deeply embedded in the bones of the Resident Committee is the Chinese Communist Party. So when we think of this clearly and then look back at the people in Shanghai driving their cars, celebrating, waving the CCP's flag, and essentially saying that Shanghai is reopened, well, you will have a deeper understanding of how the CCP has played with everybody in the palm of its hands, and this kind of evil that is in its bones. And thank you so much for watching today. This is China Insider. I'm David Zhang. We'll see you next time.